This episode of Midco Sports Magazine is presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Hello, welcome once again to Midco Sports Magazine, and 3 stories this month about toughness. We have a story from North Dakota about a cast of characters who have put together their own professional wrestling company. They are rough and tough and highly entertaining, and that story is coming up. Another story about a high school freshman in Nebraska who uses guts and a guide to make her way around in one of the toughest of high school sports. But up first, when you think of Notre Dame football, what comes to mind? Probably Rudy. But when you think about Notre Dame football coaches, you think of Knute Rockne and Lou Holtz. But did you know that the coach that's won the most national championships for the Fighting Irish graduated from high school in Winter, South Dakota? Here is David Brown with more on the life and legacy of Notre Dame football coach Frank Leahy.
Our story of a legendary football coach starts appropriately enough at a baseball field. Leahy Bowl in Winter, South Dakota, a throwback stadium that's only fitting to an old school legend.
Which I think is hilarious because apparently he loved baseball but was brutal at it, and then my brother ends up playing baseball, who was actually a very good pitcher.
Ryan Leahy is Frank Leahy's grandson and a third-generation Notre Dame football player who has yet to visit the unique ballpark.
I so badly want to go there because I've heard the stories about a baseball field and I have not seen it, and that's one thing I really want to do.
Ryan currently works in downtown Chicago, right in the heart of Notre Dame fandom. But while the connection between Chi-Town and South Bend is easy to see, the Leahy legacy started building in Winter. Frank was a superstar athlete at Winter High School in the early 1920s. He was someone you didn't really want to mess with, not only because of his athletic prowess, but also his attitude.
Frank's father, my great-grandfather, and him didn't get along because he wanted him to box. Everybody at that point was either boxing or bare-knuckle fist fighting. And apparently my grandfather was very good at that too, but he wanted to play football, and that became the big falling out. So I guess he left and packed up everything he had, any money he had, and a horse, and apparently sold the horse, and that's how he somehow ended up in South Bend. It's kind of amazing to think he took that leap of faith and just ran out and said, hey, this is what I want to do.
Once he was in South Bend, he caught the eye of the legend of all legends, Knute Rockne. He played offensive tackle for Rockne's last 3 Fighting Irish teams, winning 2 national championships. But a career-ending knee injury in 1930 actually became a blessing in disguise.
When he got injured, he ended up spending quite a long time in the Mayo Clinic with Rockne in the same room as him, talking football, and came back his senior year and coached the freshmen. He wasn't able to play anymore. Then from that time on, his career just kept going.
He was masterful at being able to understand kind of the psychology of football and how maybe that differed from one player to the next in terms of what you needed to do.
Frank bounced from college to college for the next decade, perfecting his coaching craft at every stop along the way, before ultimately returning to his alma mater as head coach in 1941.
Notre Dame students welcome new football coach Frank Leahy.
I didn't get to experience his coaching style, but from his players, it was, well, our practices are going to be tougher than the games, and they knew that. But they said every time we got into a game, it was almost like hey, we know we got to win this because otherwise next week's going to be worse.
The stories that his former players would tell were kind of legendary in their own right in terms of the things that he would say at different times and what you'd say on a Monday or Tuesday versus what you'd say on a Friday or in a pregame speech. And he was just great at just having a feel for his team and what needed to be said at the right time.
In Frank's 3rd year at the helm, Notre Dame won its first national championship since his playing days. But his biggest impact would come when football took a backseat to reality.
When World War II came around, he ended up going into the Navy, and I don't think it's any secret he spent a long time recruiting in there. When they came back from World War II, they put together some of the best teams that they've ever seen.
It was a complicated time, I think, in terms of football in those post-war years, and yet I think those were some of the most amazing accumulations of great football players here at Notre Dame that we've ever had.
Frank returned to his coaching post in 1946, and his incoming freshman class never experienced the agony of defeat. From 1946 to 1949, Notre Dame won 36 games, 3 national championships, and never lost.
When you look at the sheer volume of All-Americans and national award winners that he's coached, it was an amazing collection of talent. I mean, arguably, maybe the best stretch, the best decade, the best 15-year period, maybe, including the pre- and post-war years there. Probably as good as we've ever had at Notre Dame.
Leahy's track record was nothing short of impeccable, but the same couldn't be said for his health. A pancreatic attack at halftime of a 1953 game nearly killed him, and he resigned as head coach a few months later.
He put everything that he had into his job. He was just a very intense guy, so I'm guessing a lot of his former players and even some of his coaches that coached for him maybe didn't see the side where there was a lot of outward enjoyment very often, just because of his focus.
Frank worked in and out of football until his death in 1973, but he left this earth as arguably the most successful person in the history of Notre Dame athletics, winning a combined 6 national championships as a player and coach. He left the Fighting Irish as a winner, just like the way he came in.
What if he hadn't gotten in a fight with his father and decided to go to Notre Dame? What if he hadn't, blown out his knee and ended up spending all this time with Rockne at the Mayo Clinic, really talking about football and deciding, here's what I want to do, I want to coach now.
He's a great example of somebody who maybe was, I shouldn't say anonymous, that's probably unfair, but maybe didn't come from one of the hotbeds of football, and yet look at what he accomplished.
And joined by David Brown, and just a great story, and a lot of the things Leahy came up with in the 40s and 50s, football teams are still using today, right? And he's famous for one other thing. What's that?
Yeah, he's widely credited, actually, with the phrase, when the going gets tough, let the tough get going. It's become such a cliche in sort of our modern sports world nowadays, but when you look back at his personal history, the fact that he fought with his father, basically hitchhiked to Notre Dame, and became this tough-nosed football coach, starts to make a little more sense.
All right, and John Belushi in Animal House, one of his famous lines, might not have happened.
Absolutely.
Without
we don't
Frank
have
Leahy.
that great line without Frank Leahy. John Belushi's most famous line would not have happened.
All right, thanks, David Brown. Well, up next, we go behind the scenes with the heroes and the villains and an entire production of Matt Madness with a professional wrestling company out of North Dakota.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back. Talking about toughness this month, and you know those guys in your local high school and college wrestling teams are tough, but what about the guys with the tiny tights and the big belts that you see on TV? And what would you think of a group of people who got together and tried to create their own version of professional wrestling? Well, Andrew Socek has the story of a group in North Dakota who make it very hard to tell what is real and what is just plain silly.
Following contest is scheduled for one fall, and it's for the EWI Epic Championship.
This is 2 grown men facing off in a 16-foot ring, filled with body slams, spinning heel kicks, top rope headbutts, headlocks, punches, fist drops, the occasional foreign object, and a lot of showboating. This is professional wrestling in the Midwest. Fans of all ages come to this hotel conference room in Mandan, North Dakota, to see these larger-than-life characters up close, who are actually pretty normal.
My real name is Danny Warren. I perform as Hotshot Danny Duggan.
My name is Tommy Sinkfield, TW3, Thomas Walton III.
My real name is Brian Skibo. My real name is Steven Stonebreaker. I also wrestle under my real name as well.
My name is Sylvester J. Fox, managerial extraordinaire, but I'm better known to the wrestling world as Sly.
And Sly is better known to his students as Joe Deutsch.
I was originally an elementary physical education teacher, and now I'm a college professor at NDSU.
Joe generally plays a bad guy manager, known in wrestling lingo as a heel. It's a character that constantly antagonizes the good guy, known as the Face. He does it only for the love of entertaining, volunteering his time on and off for the past 15 years.
I did this when I was much younger, while I was originally going to school, and now that my kids are at the age where they're watching WWE on Monday nights, they're like, Dad, you used to manage, the Iron Sheik, and you've managed George Animal Steel, and we want to see you do it again. So I slowly but surely got back into the business, even got to manage Hacksaw Jim Duggan this summer.
While the results of these matches are predetermined, it's best not to use a certain word.
There's a lot of people that go out there and they say it's fake, and what we do in the chairs are fake, and none of this stuff hurts. And thing is, what they fail to realize is it's like you might as well call us glorified stuntman. Like George Clooney has a movie and he's out there and they call cut. He's on the top of a cliff and he's about to jump off and he's gonna survive somehow. We don't get the cut. If we're at the top of this rope, we're gonna jump off. We're gonna do these stunts and we're gonna do this to the fullest, to try and protect ourselves and the guy that we're working with. So when people say it's fake, I kind of take a little offense to it, but at the same time, they just don't understand how this works.
This particular wrestling company is known as EWI, the Elite Wrestling Initiative. It was started by Mercer Sage, who does almost all of the behind-the-scenes work, from promoting the events, to editing the shows for public access, to scheduling all of the talent. Though he does get a little bit of help from his mom.
I usually try to help him wherever I can, if I sell tickets or if I just help him promote or hang signs or whatever. Whatever I can do, I try to help him.
Besides the incredible amount of work it takes to put on a show, Mercer also steps into the ring as Mercer Sage King Sage. He does all of this while attending Bismarck State College.
Work or everything for this kind of stuff.
He even hosts his own radio show on campus. So then, why does he do it? Why would anyone drive from Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, even Canada to come to a small town in North Dakota for a decent chance at injuring themselves and not make a lot of money while doing it?
The love of professional wrestling, it really boils down to that. If you don't love professional wrestling and have a passion for it, you'd have to be an idiot to put your body through the abuse we do on a regular basis.
Opportunity. I get opportunity from every show that I go to, more opportunity comes my way.
I love the artisticness of it, the skill, the exchanging holds, all of that stuff. It really captured me and made me want to do that.
When you're growing up, some people want to be a firefighter, some people want to be a police officer, some people, want to be a superhero. I always wanted to put on tights and be a professional wrestler.
Another misconception that the wrestlers face is that they're not even real athletes.
There's no doubt in my mind that these guys are athletes. To even ask that question is honestly silly.
Developing the strength, cardio, and coordination necessary to compete, as well as learning to take a bump, which is a code word for falling, puts these wrestlers in their own unique category of training. But that doesn't mean there aren't very real consequences to what they do.
Like that ring, for example, that ring is not a trampoline at all. So when you land on it, you need to learn how to land properly so that you don't hurt yourself. And when we go to hit each other, I'm really hitting somebody. I'm hitting them as hard as I can. I'm just hitting them in a way and in an area to make sure that I'm not going to injure them.
But despite countless hours of training and practice, every wrestler can share a lengthy list of injuries they've received.
I've torn my MCL.
I've had shoulder injury right here.
I broke my nose. I have been dropped on my head really bad a few times where I've had some stingers where my hands and feet went numb.
Separated shoulder.
They told me I broke my neck in 3 different places.
But the pain and the long hours on the road are just part of the business. Because in the end, this group of misfits, professionals, and hopefuls kind of make up their own family. Each person who steps inside the ring knows what it's like to experience the struggle as well as the thrill of being a star in the moment. It's indescribable, really, which kind of sums up professional wrestling.
At the end of the day, it's entertainment at its finest. It's not real wrestling, it's amazing acting, and I love every minute of it.
All right, joined by Andrew, who is our resident professional wrestling guru here at Midco Sports Network. And talk about the history of events like this in North Dakota and professional wrestling in general. Goes back to what, carnival days? Is that where it started?
It does, yeah. Back in the the turn of the 19th century, it started out as a little bit legitimate, actually. They would have a tough, strong guy go into the ring. He would talk to the crowd and say hey, if anybody can beat me, you'll get $10, which is a lot of money back then. But a lot of times they would have plants in the crowd, like people that were in on it. So they would go in there, have like a good match, go back and forth for a bit, and people would believe like, oh, maybe next time he'll actually get this guy. So sold tickets that way. And
that's what they're trying to recreate in North Dakota and in professional wrestling.
Yeah, and over the years they've just been more honest about this is a work, and it's just kind of grown ever since.
All right, thanks a lot, Andrew. Well, coming up, cross country is a tough sport, sometimes run over some tough terrain. So imagine what it would be like to do it when you can't see where you're going. That story coming up next.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back. We have heard the famous line from Notre Dame football coach Frank Leahy, when the going gets tough, let the tough get going. And that certainly describes the young woman in our next story. She is a cross-country runner, blind since birth, who is out there giving it a go despite her setback.
Today, my personal goal is to get under 30 minutes, and so I'm about a minute and a half away from that. My goal is that by the end of my high school career, I'm on varsity.
Maura Loberg is a freshman at Wayne High School in Nebraska, and she has been running cross country for 3 years now.
We have a family friend, and she's from Iowa, and she was a blind cross country runner. And my parents were inspired by her, and so in 7th grade, they're like, how about we have you do this? Because you need to do a sport.
I'm a physical therapist, and I just wanted my daughter to be physical and experience getting stronger and feeling better, cardiovascular, heart. So I pushed her into sports. I said, we're going to do something, and I looked at what was available in junior high and high school, and this was it.
It was pretty experimental. We just kind of found a guide, and they talked to Rocky, and we just kind of went from there.
It's a sport that some people, they don't think we do anything, but we have to put some time in, and we have to put some work in, and do a lot of work to be good. So it's a great sport for kids to be involved with.
I used to hate it, but after I did well in a few meets, and I'm like, okay, I like this. This isn't too bad.
Maura was born without optic nerves in her eyes, total blindness. She has no perception of light or shadows, and thus no visual clues to show her the way.
She goes by feel in her feet, and she reads the terrain with her feet a little bit, and then Molly, her guide, typically they've got a system figured out. She cues her, and she trusts her totally. If she didn't have that trust, I don't think it would work as well as it does.
In about 15 steps.
Molly Redden went to college in Wayne and used to babysit the Loberg kids. She is now a physical therapist and has become Maura's regular companion on the course.
She's my eyes, and I do everything else pretty much.
Basically, I just have to describe the terrain to Maura, make sure that keep her safe first and foremost.
During this meet, she will say, okay, we curve left, sharp right, so-and-so. And she'll also warn me about the terrain, if there's a hill coming up, or if there's people passing, if we need to if we're passing somebody.
Great job. Go back to rope. Okay.
When Maura started, her times were around 37 minutes to finish 5,000 meters. She has that down to around 31 minutes, and the next goal is to finish in under 30. She eventually wants to be in the top 7 runners on the Wayne varsity team, in a sport that is harder than it looks.
It's tough when you go out. If you say anybody can do it, I think about anybody can do it if they're determined to do it. They have to have that determination. I've had kids who come out and run one lap in practice, and a lot of tears are flying, and some have made it, and some don't make it through that first week. And it's a battle, and you have to, keep trying.
Cross country is just a hard sport, and I feel like those athletes that participate in it admire one another because they all understand how difficult it is. So even opposing teams, at the last race we were on, when we were coming around the course, they were cheering her on by name, and they weren't Wayne cross country kids. I think everybody just realizes how difficult it is and respects everybody who participates in it.
Back up to grass.
And Maura just wants people to see her like any other runner and appreciate her effort just as they would for any other competitor.
I want them to know that really, other than the rope and guide, I run the same distance. I have the same expectations from my coaches as anybody else does, and I just want them to know that I'm a regular kid. I'm not like modified otherwise. And so it's really, yeah, it's just a blind, Wayne just happens to have a blind runner.
She's one that the other kids know. It's when Maura does something that it's hard for them to complain. So there's very little complaining on our team, and I think there's some enthusiasm involved. And I think the whole thing has brought our team together. We're even closer than usual.
In addition to cross country, Maura likes to swim and likes to play beep baseball, a modified version of the sport using sound signals. And she loves music. She wrote and sings the song you've been listening to. It is called Survivor.
I'm a fighter, and I'll never break. Come on, in spite of the ache, survivor.
She is a fighter and a warrior, and she is an inspiration to her town and her team.
She works at it hard every day. I mean, I don't know how sometimes she does it to come out. I've tried on my own running, and the thing I get to do is I get to open my eyes and see where I'm going before I fall down and that type of thing. And I think they've tried it too, and I think that they understand that to have a hardship that they can battle through, and that it gives them the determination and inspiration to be better people and to be better runners.
I will survive today.
And Maura says that she does want to go to college, doesn't know where yet, but she wants to eventually be a teacher and help kids like herself, and we wish her well. Thanks to everybody for their involvement in this month's episode. You can see these stories and all stories from the past on YouTube. Thanks for watching Midco Sports Magazine.
This has been Midco Sports Magazine, presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.